Could you tell me a little bit more about this composer and what attracted you to studying his legacy and how your thesis came about? And maybe would you be able to summarize your thesis?
I wouldn't just call him a composer. I know that's what I sometimes refer to him as, but he was actually so much more. I've divided his legacy into 7 categories, and those are, of course, a performer. He had an enormous career as a soloist. He was reviewed by pretty much any living reviewer at the time. He was also a chamber musician. Quite importantly, he was second violinist in the Isaïe Quartet. That's the string quartet that premiered Debussy String Quartet, for example, amongst other things. They did Belgian premieres of Franck Quintet and Franck Quartet, also Vincent Dandy music, and later on he established his own chamber group, also a string quartet. He called it Kriegboom Quartet, and they became a huge success in Paris. And then they went on several tours, and they were touring a lot. And then he got asked to be a director of Philharmonic Society in Barcelona. But I'll come back to that. So this still is the first important part of his legacy is the performing. Of course, we cannot trace this legacy, unfortunately, because he didn't leave any recordings. That's pretty much how we trace the legacy of performance. If they had any recordings, he didn't. So I'm just going on the reviews and the articles written about him. Interestingly, he was also a leader of La Monnaie in Brussels, the opera house. When he got this post, he was only 16 years old, which is incredible. And then we get to his compositions, which are not very vast. He was very close with Ernest Chausson. They had a mutual admiration for each other, and he dedicated his very first opus, his Esquisses, to Chausson. Later on, Chausson actually dedicated his string quartet to Kriegboom, which is a nice little arch. Then he edited a lot of music. He edited a lot of kind of popular concertos at the time and other sonatas and all sorts of things, to be honest. And then that ties together with his pedagogical work. He's had probably around 300 students overall, and he taught pretty much everywhere where he was, first as Isaïe's assistant in Brussels, then in Paris, then in Barcelona where he had academy, and then he got a post, the first official post, as a professor in Liège in 1910, and then he was a professor at Brussels Conservatoire from 1919. And he published his huge method, which was 5 volumes of technique, 5 volumes of theory and practice, 3 volumes of duets, 12 volumes of studies. It's just an enormous amount of pedagogical materials. And then, of course, he was director of this Ciutat Filharmonica in Barcelona, in which he had to overlook all the sort of programming, all the concert programming for 9 seasons. And then in that role, he achieved quite a lot, actually. The first time he did the Beethoven Symphony Cycle in Barcelona, for example, he was also championing new music, and actually more Catalan music was programmed in Barcelona. There's always this very interesting national identity in Barcelona. Is it Spanish? Is it Catalan? He managed to program a lot of Catalan composers for the first time. And then he was a conductor himself, and he conducted a lot of these concerts in Barcelona and then actually all over Europe. So as you can see, the legacy is huge. I wouldn't just say he's just a performer, or he's just a composer. It's just so much more. Oh, I am forgetting a very important one. In 1914 he set up and was an artistic director of his own music magazine that he contributed his own writing to. And the agenda of that magazine was to highlight the new current music, sort of saying to people, stop looking into the past and always playing just, our what's in the canon, look at the new modern music that's around. There were a couple of more other things on the agenda, but unfortunately that magazine did not run for a very long time because it was interrupted by World War One when it hit Brussels in July of 1914. Yeah, so I find it really fascinating finding out so much about a figure that is unknown even to musicians and musicologists. Of course, violinists would have heard of Isaïe Sonata No. 5 that is dedicated to him, and that is the big gateway into Kriegboom. Also, someone a bit more geeky would have heard of Isaïe Quartet and knowing Kriegboom as the second violinist in the Isaïe Quartet. But actually what I found even more fascinating than anything before is that his method was actually used quite a lot, including in the UK. And I spoke to some of my colleagues at the Royal Opera House, and they or their parents have studied using Kriegboom method, which I didn't even know that would be the case. So it's really interesting. So that side of it, his legacy is so important in the pedagogical world that up to this day his methods are still being used. I find it incredible.
That sounds absolutely amazing. Did he have any particular affinity with some of the major composers of the day, like Debussy and Poulenc? I was just wondering.
He had a correspondence with Debussy. I think they had a mutual, again, admiration. Debussy actually wrote pretty interesting things in letters. For example, when he was struggling with Pelléas and Melisande, he just wrote to Kriegboom in a letter that he was just going round and round in circles like a circus horse. And that letter is actually quoted in a lot of books about Debussy, but no one kind of drew an attention, who was this letter to? They were friends, and he had a huge big friendship with Chanson. Obviously French with Debussy. And from the Belgium side, it was Guillaume Lequeux. Don't know if you've come across this Belgian composer. He's quite an important one. He died very young, actually, tragically, but they were kind of same age, and they grew up together and did chamber music all through their youth. Vincent d'Indy, of course, they had a big correspondence and friendship. Kriegboom was also known in Russia quite a lot, and he had on 1 year he had 35 concerts in Russia, which was incredible. And he participated in some concerts organized by organizer named Maxim Galkin, and then he was participating in Zilotti concerts. And of course we know Zilotti we know that name through Rachmaninoff, who was his teacher. And he had correspondence with César Cui, and I think he actually admired Russian music. I found his diaries in the archive, Kriegboom's diary. It's such hard work getting through his handwriting because it's not very neat, and just one odd page, there wasn't anything on the reverse apart from he really tried to scribble some music. I really concentrated and looked at it, and that was from Borodin's Prince Igor. So I thought, oh wow, he must have heard it either at the opera house or in a concert, and must have just tried to quickly write it down, the melody that he liked. I find it really interesting.